I guess my first question for you is kind of how you got started in the vacation rental industry, and what led you to kind of where you are today with all your properties.
The big question, I think, like a lot of vacation rental managers, very few of them, I think, started out in life going, I'm going to grow up and be a vacation rental manager. It literally, in a lot of cases, falls in your lap. And it kind of did for me in a lot of ways. I used to work in managing a provincial historic site, and I've been involved with tech startup companies in the early 2000s, buy direct networks, and I worked for an airline doing work for them. I worked for tourism marketing boards. And then, one day I came across a company that was marketing vacation rentals. I started working with them. And as somebody who came from a tourism background, I was really actually disappointed about how it was being run. I didn't think it was very transparent. And while I was working with that company, I got an offer to go work with another one that was struggling as a new startup, and I joined them, and that was EMR Vacation Rentals, and they asked me to come in as a partnership, so I came in as a partner. And first thing we did is started revamping websites, structure, because back then a lot of those companies wouldn't even show rates. There'd be star symbols and dollar signs. So it'd be somewhere between this price and that price. It was more like an auto sales shop than a vacation rental accommodation.
Like a used car, see what they could close you for on the phone.
A lot of people in the industry, I used to say, yeah, it was kind of like Kerber car salespeople. They.
What are you willing to pay, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, let me talk to my manager and back and forth. And you can't do that. It's not transparent, but that's kind of how I fell into it. It was a company that was struggling. They had some difficulty with some of their original people that were not operating very transparent. So that's what I came in. I got involved at that point and said, no, you've got to provide a transparent operation. You got to show rates to your customer on the front end. You've got to make sure that way you're also showing rates to your owners, right? So that they know what's being processed and transacted, because, there was a lot of money going on that time. It was booming in a different way because the internet was still very easy to create SEO and a lot of traffic. Google was new and fresh. They didn't care. It was easy to be the top rank locally. And being in Canada on Vancouver Island and in Vancouver, the vacation rental markets were very easily to drive that traffic to you. And because Canadian dollar was running at about 65-cent dollar, the vast majority of the high-paying stays on oceanfront homes and vacation homes there was coming from the U.S. and the United Kingdom, because their currency was so powerful and it was explosive. So, it's kind of funny when I look at the rates from 2003, 2004, 2005, in that period. It actually was more expensive then than it is now. So we have not seen a dramatic increase compared to those years, at least here in our market. But we were the first company when I got involved to put all the rates out there. I had companies phoning, what are you doing? All the competitors are going to see your rates. I said, exactly. Guess what? All the homeowners started calling us, and we started to grow.
Cool.
And that's what we did. And it was all about transparency and being honest. That was it. That was the big thing, is just tell the truth. A lot of companies, they try to put a rosy pair of glasses on somebody's eyes, and they can't deliver what they're selling. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I guess at that time it was not like it is today, where you can go on. I mean, there's so many price comparison sites and everything like that. But even now, there's a lot of companies, I'm sure, that hide fees, and there's some things that just don't make sense. But it's that's huge to kind of be one of the first people doing that. So
yeah, and I think a lot, and we had created first thing I did, I said we need to design our own custom property management software and booking engine. We did all that. We had a developer in house, which was really good, and we actually grew quite large. We went from literally about 25 properties when I joined to, by the time we got to the 2010 Olympic Games, by 2010 we had over 500.
Wow.
And mainly because of the Olympics, we had taken on a huge inventory of one-hit wonder properties, if you want to call it, just people that wanted to leave Vancouver or Whistler, and they were just putting up for 3 weeks to a month, maybe 2 months for the Paralympic Games as well. And they just wanted to get out and put up their own homes to do that. So we did that. We ran about 2,500 people through 3 weeks. Probably not much any different than what you guys go through on the Big Island sometimes with
Ironman.
Ironman, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and but it was pretty exciting time. And after that, we maintained around 160 plus properties. We were heavily in Vancouver and in that market. But then about 2017, things started to change. Of course, the rise of Airbnb changed everything, right? It was like a wrecking ball for professional managers operating locally, because it created a whole new era of type of managers who no longer called themselves vacation rental managers. They were now hosts. People were renting out, long-term housing stock and converting it into basically ghost hotels. It's created a lot of bad blood with local city councils and complaints, which then triggered short-term rental regulations, which went hard against wholly owned vacation homes. That some of them have been around for decades, and that really damaged our inventory. And especially in Vancouver, we basically had to shut down Vancouver by about 2018.
Wow.
And lost most of our inventory. So we came back to the island, and where our main office is, and we just built from there and continued to build from there now. So we're getting back up in our numbers again, which is good. But
Cool.
We're fighting the minefield, the short-term rental regulation in different cities and communities on Vancouver Island as well. But it's good. We're on the right swing going upwards now. By next spring, we're looking to have around 80 properties. So
cool. That's awesome, man. Yeah, that must be crazy to have seen the regulations come in, because with the kind of the Airbnb boom, it really just like went full send. And there's the people who are like doing arbitrage and like renting out places, and it just like I would say, on my opinion, I'm always not one for government regulation, but I could see how it was getting out of control, and then unfortunately, they put everyone in the same pot. So even if you've been around since 2003 operating legally in these areas, they're like, nope, you can't do that anymore. And so what happened here, I know you're kind of familiar with the Big Island, but up in up north, there's a pretty big ranch up there, like Kohala Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did the short-term rental thing at STVR. I think it was 2018. They rezoned all this stuff. And so these homes are $2 to $3 million houses with beautiful ocean views, and they've pretty much took them from vacation rentals and said they need to be long-term housing. Okay, and so it doesn't make any sense, because now those are places that were really only vacation homes are now either empty, or it still didn't solve the problem. So I think they want to get more housing for people, but they do it in certain areas that just don't make sense. So
well, exactly. I think the it's been tough on a lot of us in our industry. And I think in every state, every country around the world in some shape or form has had to address this. Some of them harshly, where there's been total bans, some with, like Vancouver, they didn't ban everything. They banned everything that was vacation home oriented, but they didn't ban shared space or what we would consider the long-term housing stock, which would have been the basement suites and carriage homes in the people's homes that were traditionally rented out to long-term renters. They all now converted their own spaces into Airbnbs. And of course, pricing became a concern, especially early on, and they were discounting heavily. But it made it very difficult, I think, for operators everywhere. And, the Airbnb effect has had, both positive and negative effects. Negative, it's the STR regulation, which has been penalizing against many people, especially long-term operators who are local, have had licenses, and we're not the ones breaking, yet we're getting blamed and getting thrown, what they say, the baby's being thrown out with the bathwater. It's exactly what's happened to a lot of licensed managers, and have had to fight to survive. And but on the positive side, I mean, Airbnb has introduced tens of millions, or I would say probably billions by now, of money that's come into our sector to invest in new ideas and technologies that we never had before. Now, Verbo and Expedia slash HomeAware, they were kind of first to kind of, I think, start to consolidate a lot of the PMS within the property management community. But Airbnb came in from the individual host side, and I think between the two of them, that's brought in a lot of investment. I mean, now you could probably go to a convention 15 years ago and there would be very little technology there. And now it's the vendor floors are full, and you've got every possible technology at your fingertips to manage vacation. So that's the exciting part. And but it's hard because I think any manager that's been in an STR fight on the legislation side, they've probably found the last 3 to 5 years they've spent more time on advocacy and fighting for their lives than they are building their own business.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a difficult part of our industry, but it's also woken us up throughout all of that. On the underlining side is we've discovered much more in depth look into our own operations, right? And COVID, of course, kicked that door wide open. And that shows just how dependent so many property managers had become over the years. We've realized, and I mean, dependent off of online travel agencies, and specifically the Airbnb or Verbo, Expedia or Booking.com, etc. And that many of us who had been in business for a long time, I mean, we're going into our 19th year of operation now. Wow. So we came out of the gate for a long time as 100% OTA free. And it wasn't until about 2012, late 2011, 2012, we saw the change, right? Google changed their algorithm. They made paid search become more important than organic. They moved the advertisers that used to be on the side, they move them up above. And then, of course, the PC technology, people weren't using desktops as much. It was moving more and more mobile. And now it's almost entirely mobile with a small percentage of maybe 10% of the population on PCs. Or desktop computers, I should say, because some people might be on Mac, and please don't be offended.
I'm not too offended. Yeah, my Mac crashed this morning, so.
So I think that, but that changed a lot because search became impatient. It was like, okay, the first 3 spots on your little screen, click, right? And that's what gave Airbnb power. That's what gave the venture capitalists power to invest with Google and build a business with billions of dollars of investment dollars that was really being spent to Google to position them to drive all that traffic to them.
Well, it still is. I mean, well, not that you weren't saying it still is, but it's like amazing that they you search a place and I'll only click on their links just to charge them money. I don't actually book through them, right? No, it's just joking. But you go on, and it's like every single location they have paid Google ads for. So it's crazy when you think of that number of you look up, vacations in Kona, Hawaii, and the first 1 or 2 in Airbnb, and then if a local PM is advertising, and then hopefully their SEO is up there as well. But that's in every single location they're spending hand over fist to try to get up there. So
well, and I think I like what Google's done in the sense that I think they've realized over the last couple years, especially that I would say last 3 years, that they were losing search positions to these big middle industries, big marketing machines in the middle industry. So the Airbnbs, the Expedia, etc., who are all spending and driving all that traffic to them. And of course, they're building their own apps. They're trying to control their own audience as well. And if they could, they would drive everyone off of Google as well to just go direct. And I think Google's realizing, hey, we're the king of search here. We just sold off all our search to these guys, and they don't need us as much anymore. But I think it's turning out they still need them. And Google pulled the reins back on that. And I think, they've really changed the hyper local marketing much better. So that side of it, your local operators are getting a lot more exposure now, because now you're showing up on local searches, right? If somebody searches in, where I am, Victoria, BC vacation rentals, or anything like that, they list all the companies that are there on a map, right? It's just all right there automatically. So the paid search doesn't have as much dominance as it did, say, 3 years ago. But they're still spending, as you said, they're still spending billions of Google to maintain that traffic. But I think the OTAs have a bigger fight in their hands, and that's, of course, inventory.
Yeah.
The whole discussion.
So I guess one thing to respond to, and then a question for you. So the question would be, how dependent are you on OTAs right now? Are you still on Airbnb and VRBO? And then I guess some insights is, I think guests are starting to realize that how much money they save by booking direct, which is pretty cool to see. So even though they're spending a ton of money, they almost, I know Ted uses it to, and a lot of people use it to market their properties, but they jack the rates up just so they can, they put their company name as much as they can to try to get people to, just come book direct and save 30%. So, or 20% or whatever it is. So,
well, exactly. I think that's I think that's a condition that the OTAs, especially the older ones like Expedia, are very experienced, because they were the most dominant booking engine for hotels and travel well before I think they started in 2000, 2001. And at one point, they literally, if you had built your business off Expedia as a hotel, you became so dependent, they would just tell you what you're going to pay them. And if you did, they would turn you off. They just shut it off, and they could destroy a business with a flick of a switch. So they would say, give us 42% of your revenues, or, we want a 45% discount on your rates. And you're going to hand over those blocks of rooms to us to fill, right, as a travel wholesaler. So they're already experienced on how to manipulate and get control and dependencies in place. But then what was the great equalizer for Expedia? Booking.com, right? Booking.com comes along and says, no, we can do it for 15% flat, right? And that's kind of changed that side of it. Now, the difference between Booking.com and Expedia, and say with hotels versus the vacation rentals, is what you talked about. People were using Expedia, and they still do today, or other search engines that show flights, for example. They'll search flights on those entities. They see the brands that are available for those flights. They will go and say, oh, look, there's Delta. There's a good price on Delta. I'll just go phone Delta myself, right? Now, there's a certain percentage, they just want to do it all in one spot, and that's where the value is on a travel agency. A travel agency, online or not, is more of convenience service for somebody who might have a busy life. They don't want to do it. They just want to do it all quickly in one spot. But people who are savvy shoppers, they'll go direct. And that was the big thing with Expedia and the OTAs, that they have a high turnover at the shopping cart, right? That's the thing that they're having to address, that people are taking it to the shopping cart and they're using it to shop, and then they stop, and then they go and try and find it direct. So they're getting more and more savvy again. There was a time that they didn't, especially newer travelers, I would say a younger generation that got raised up in the last 7 years as young travelers on Airbnb. And then they start realizing, hey, this is a fun, trendy thing to use, and this is exciting. And hey, I can go stay in somebody's, VW van in their backyard, or sleep on somebody's couch, or hey, now I can start booking a vacation suite or a home. And then you got the professionals started to come in there, and it changed a lot. But the problem they have is that transparency side. At least with the traditional model of the OTAs, they never mask the brands, and they still don't do that with hotels. If you want to book a hotel on Expedia or Booking.com, it shows the hotel. So why do they mask that? Well, it's exactly that. We're in a much more difficult position than a hotel, right? Hotel traditionally will own their unit. There is some hotels where their owner, each unit's owned, and then the hotel management company will run it. But they're given a lot of leeway to be able to offer deep discounts and things like that, where a lot of vacation rental managers are not in that position. They got to consider what the owner's getting paid, you know, what they need to make on it to survive. And the online travel agency said, well, here's what we'll do, you know, especially Airbnb. We'll just charge the guest fee to them. And that means the commission you would normally pay us, we're now charging to that guest on the outside. However, we're going to have to mask all of your information because we need to make the money off that, right? And then they took it a step further. We're also going to be the merchant of record.
Yeah.
Us have been operating for a long time, or a lot of people who have been individual owners who used to do it on VRBO, now called Verbo because they changed it into a verb. They had changed that process, right? They went from a listing site of here's the pictures, here's some rates, you know, and that's kind of how it was. And you would contact them, an email address or a phone number, and then you would work out a booking with them based on their posted rates. But it was not online bookable, which was really good for SEO, right?
Yeah.
It's good on that side. But maybe for somebody who wanted the convenience of being able to book online, it just wasn't there. And that's, as I said, where Airbnb came in. But Verbo then followed suit with Airbnb and did the same thing. Now we're going to mask your brand and we're going to be processing payments. But they changed on that and said, okay, property managers, you can process payments. We'll charge the guest fee, but we won't expose you to each other until we've got our guest fee. Right?
Yeah. They're kind of grabbing at everything, and Airbnb obviously is still the merchant of record. VRBO is a little more property manager friendly, but it's it's funny because, well, it's not funny actually with the Airbnb. It's the horror stories. I'm sure you've been on some of the forums, and it's like, you know, the new air cover thing they've got is like, my guest showed up and they felt uncomfortable. And so feeling uncomfortable, what does that mean? Does it mean you're in Hawaii and it's 87 and then it's hot and you're uncomfortable and then you want your money back? That's the type of, you know, gray area they've created. And then, you know, they just send the money back. And, you know, there's countless stories of just taking advantage there. So,
well, and a lot of problems like new startups, like they stumbled over all the issues property managers have been around for a long time already knew, right? So they you know, were very inexperienced in the industry and didn't even think of all the pitfalls. So they had to learn with lots of mistakes and not listen to pros, but they fumbled a lot through all that. And of course, they had this huge rise of inventory of everything in their dog you can think of, everything that said, from large estates down to sleeping in the back seat of somebody's car parked on the street. You know, somebody's tent in their backyard. I mean, they just offered anything, not even considering liabilities and issues and damage it could do to neighborhoods and stuff like that. But they, you know, they made a lot of decisions that did a lot of damage to a lot of people. And but you know, I think they've learned, but they've got one side now that they didn't have before. Before, they were run pretty much on their own with their VC capital, and were able to run it as basically like they own the whole thing themselves. To now they got shareholders.
oh yeah.
So now that you're public, now you have huge, you know, investment companies that are buying shares and putting them into mutual funds and, you know, wherever, or individual stock market purchases of your stock. You've got all these shareholders now that have a vested interest. You better make a profit. And they were never profitable. So now they become more corporate. So as I was saying, that fun, cute, casual aspect of trendy of Airbnb is now known. Now they're just a big, large multinational corporation being run by expectations for massive profits. So that loose connection, you know, that side of it is a big change for them as well. Just like Expedia has to run for their shareholders, just like Booking.com, which is owned by Priceline, you know, is just take a look at the Priceline shares are massive. Why? Because they own Booking.com.
Yeah.
And so it's, yeah, once you get those big, huge shareholders to please, then they want more money, and that dependency is a dangerous thing. And sorry, I think I missed the first part of your question. We sort of answered the back half of it on that, but sorry, forgot about the first
Oh,
part.
no worries. You're good.
Yeah. So just covering a lot of that, what the OTAs, where they're at today. I think the big thing at this point, first part of your question was asking, what was our dependency level and how are we now today?
Yep.
As I said, up to 2012, we were 100% book direct. When we switched over to Escapia PMS, which was acquired by HomeAway, over the course of about 2 years, we became over 90% dependent.
Okay.
We saw our SEO drop. We saw a whole bunch of things, which we could spend an hour on a discussion of why the SEO dropped, because basically duplicate content, all this stuff you're feeding out to the OTAs or copying all your content. And they're basically selling it back to you while diminishing your own SEO. So we became very dependent, and then we've been working our butts off since, I would say officially, since about 2017. We've worked back to about 52% of our bookings now are direct.
Cool.
And the rest are a mix between Vrbo, I would say, is our number one OTA, which includes Expedia bookings. And then Airbnb is around roughly about 9% of our bookings. So we do mitigate our exposure to them.
Do people, is it, because like Hawaii is an interesting market compared to some other markets. Every market's different. Like the Outer Banks in North Carolina, most people go back every summer. Do you find that you have a lot of repeat business, or it's one time, or maybe every other year type of thing?
Because we're multi-market on Vancouver Island, there's some leisure markets on Vancouver Island where people come back every year too.
Okay.
Each side communities that people have been coming back for generations. And then there's some areas that are kind of one hit, right? There is some people you get the repeat business, especially in the urban markets on the island. You get businesses, because we get a much more diverse types of stays in the vacation homes, because it might not necessarily be all vacation. Like we've got corporate, relocation, film production, all kinds of things going on here, and other reasons why people want to furnish rental for a short purpose. So it just depends market by market, but our overall, we've done as much as we could to leverage the OTAs as much as possible. But the key was to also market to those bookings we get to them to book direct next time. So that's the other side of that equation. The OTAs are not evil. Like I don't want to get anyone to think I'm wrong. They have their place, right? Traditionally, vacation rental or let's just say online travel agencies in overall, you would use to leverage times you couldn't book yourself, right? And then, of course, they have found a way to wedge up the middle of your business and become the central part of your business. And that's a bad position to be in, because
too much. When you lose the control, it's there's probably a fine line there, and it's, I think, once you start to invest too much into the, they say you're investing in your business, but you're really not, in a sense of, if you're, one, mainly the big thing is they block who you are, right? So unless they're blocking most of your communication, and then two, they're like you said, you're almost working against yourself with SEO, because you're just driving traffic through Airbnb versus your site.
Well, and I've been working hard with, because I'm on our technology committee for the Northwest Vacation Rental Professionals, and we met with a lot of different PMS companies, right? And I have said every time, I said, do you guys ever build out 2-tiered content distribution from there? Because you all connect to online travel agencies, but if you have a central description for a listing that's being fed out to every single marketing entity there is out there, be it Booking.com or Expedia, or even some smaller ones like Owner Direct and Airbnb. I said, all that duplicate content out there. I said, even Booking.com rewrites the content for your listing.
Yeah.
So why not create 2 descriptions? You want that highly optimized section where you as a property manager can have your content that you're not going to give to others. And then you have, whatever, something that gets by, it's decent enough, but you don't care if it goes to Vrbo, it goes to Expedia, it goes to Airbnb, and that it's not going to take away from your content.
Yep.
Make them pay for it. Literally, we've kind of got things backwards. They're making us do all the work writing content production for them, and then they want us to pay for it back. And it's the weirdest relationship.
Yeah, especially VRBO is a good example because you're paying, is it $500 a year per property or something?
Well, it depends. Our company doesn't do the subscription.
Okay.
We do a pay per booking model with them, so it's commission.
Okay.
So, but yeah, those that are grandfathered in operators can pay those subscription model, but they're diminishing that anyways. They're going to go guaranteed, and everybody should be aware of this. Airbnb has already said they're going to be charging 15% commission. They're going to compete head to head worldwide with Booking.com, and it'll be a supplier side commission. They're doing it in every country in the world with the exception of Canada, the United States, and I believe Mexico. They did try to introduce it just before COVID hit. They asked, hey, do you want to be an early adopter of this? And
early adopter.
Yeah, that's what they did. I got the letter. They said, we'll do this. We'll give you a 1% discount on it. It'll be 14%.
Only 14%. Oh, what a deal.
Yeah, for the first 6 months.
Okay, and then it goes up, right?
And then it goes up to 15, right? But you get 6 months. But then COVID hit, all those plans stopped. And of course, through COVID, they went public too. But don't be surprised. I'm going to suggest in 2023, at some point, they're going to announce they're ending the guest fee and they're going to move to a 15% flat commission. So what does that mean to all of us that are dependent off a lot of OTAs? It means that there's going to be a big rate suppression for you, and you're going to have to find a way to mitigate that especially if you're dependent off Vrbo, you're dependent off Airbnb, especially if you're already with Booking.com. Not so many people are dependent off Booking.com in North America, but worldwide, they're still the most popular booking engine in the world outside of Canada and the United States.
Well, that's huge info too for independent hosts, because if you think about independent hosts, most of them really don't have a website. And so there's different groups of independent hosts, even if they have 2 or 3 properties. A lot of people, at least I've met here, I've been talking to independent hosts, have gotten into it in the last couple of years. So it's like they bought a house and they're doing a hosted thing. They have a coffee farm, pretty, cool businesses, but they're like, oh, I threw it on Airbnb, and they're at that really super small level where they don't really understand what could happen, but some of them do realize how, vulnerable they are. They're just in a position, even if they had their own website, it's like, how am I going to reach people? Because they're going, with one property trying to compete with them. So that's interesting to hear.
There's so many, I would call them the new era of vacation rental managers, but they call themselves co-hosts on Airbnb or professional hosts, and they take on incredible amounts of inventory, and it's all entirely on Airbnb. They're exclusive. They don't have any other ways to market. They and this is what's fascinating, because the SEO discussion is kind of funny about this, but they'll create their own websites with all their listings linking to their Airbnb listings.
Yes. Like,
wow, you're actually spending money on your SEO that drives all that SEO to Airbnb. So That's the point. Anyway, but the fact is, now you're going to be looking at a 15% extra charge. You might have been getting away with 3%, as what it was before. And those days are coming over. And so if you're managing somebody's property right now, and you could do it for 20%, because it only costs 3% in charges, and you're making 20. Well, how is your owner going to look at you that now there's an additional 15% coming off that charge? And you're 20. Now you're up to 35%. You're not going to be able to compete. The managers that are all in a position to book direct, they're going to whoop your butt, because people are not going to want to pay higher, because all of you are going to raise your rates
try to keep it,
compensate for that. And then what's going to happen is people are going to go look for the best price, and it's going to be who are people able to do book direct. It'll always be, and the best service direct.
Well, what's crazy too is that with that, like you said, they've already done that in other parts of the world. So I know several people who do like the arbitrage thing we were talking about. Yeah. So they'll rent a condo or they'll rent a house for, let's say it's $4,000 a month US, and they're like, oh, it makes, I get $8,000 a month off of Airbnb. Well, you play with some of those percentages and now you're liable for 15-20%. You're not making any money and you're on the hook for the lease. And so those businesses, I think, with one press of a button on Airbnb are almost eliminated.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the pressure that the online travel agencies have is that it's said they got shareholders to please, but I think they're going to be in trouble with inventory leaving, and that they've have high expectations for inventory growth. They're walking a razor blade to balance it, right? And that's really hard. You've got pressures, and now we're into inflationary pressures. You've got housing market changes going in the downturn side. Is that going to bring in a lot of inventory in some markets? It might, because people saying, hey, I can't sell my home, I'll just put it up. So now you've got even more inventory potentially hitting in some markets. Some markets you might lose because, if interest rates continue to go up, there's a lot of people walking on the fine edge of credit, and the first thing they'll lose is their house.
Yeah.
Start watching cars, folks. If you're watching the car repo numbers, houses are next. It's hot. So if you want to see what's going on that side, watch the car repo numbers, because when people let their cars go first, then it's their houses, and it's the decline is on. So,
and what's crazy too is what you're just saying is you're getting people in the shopping cart, right? So that's where they're spending all their money. Obviously, they're not stupid. They've realized that they've become a planning site for a lot of people, and they're spending that money and they're getting gypped of the percentages. So they're like, well, the only way we can have guarantee they're going to get their money is if they're going to switch up the fee there. So they're thinking the guests will stay loyal to them, continue to book through them, and now try to whack people with that fee. But that's interesting to see how that will go.
Yeah, I think Airbnb is gonna, like a lot of technology. Look at Meta right now on Facebook. They're really struggling. And why is that? Well, they've made a lot of bad decisions, I think, for a myriad of different reasons. But they've kind of, in an internet terms, they're kind of a lot of younger generations. They're the Stone Age. Airbnb is going to go through the same effect. They were basically a millennial aged trendy software that came out, but it's the younger generations that have moved on to other things, right? Yeah. Like, oh, that's where my mom and dad are. I'm sorry, millennials, you're actually mom and dads now, and some of you might be getting into the era of becoming grandparents. So that's where you thought was young and fresh. Well, guess what? It's not anymore. And people move on to different things. But if we're going into some very difficult times financially, especially right now, shoppers, they'll still want to travel. People will travel even in difficult times, but they'll be much more conscious with their dollar and where they're going to spend it. So they'll look for ways even more to find ways to save money. And if they don't want to pay extra on Airbnb or Vrbo or, so they'll look directly, and they'll look through people they know, and they'll look for people who's actually providing the service on the ground. And that's just a natural reaction. You want to save money. Why do I want to book something and spend $300 or $400 or $500 more just for a handshake to get to know that host on the ground, right? And that's when you can. Now they'll argue, well, there's protections for your payment and that side of it. You know what? People forego insurance to save money, on flights or anything. You go and buy something. Hey, would you like extra insurance on your car rental? No.
I'm that person, and mainly because I'm too cheap. I'm like, well, you know what?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
for anybody traveling, they're going to find ways to extend their travel dollar. So they'll try and find that best rate, and that best rate guarantee is always in the hands of the actual operator providing the service on the ground.
And the person who actually controls the inventory, not the perception of the person who controls the inventory. Exactly. And people are realizing that. Even my parents, they've traveled. They always stay at a vacation rental, and so even when they've gone overseas, to a foreign country, they would look on VRBO. And it used to be they didn't have to pay, like maybe 5-10 years ago, They didn't have to pay a ridiculous fee. It was like pretty straight through,
Yeah.
from what I remember. And so once that changed, my mom was like, I'm not, the whole thing would come out and it's another $1,500 or $500 or whatever it is, for a month to stay somewhere. And they're like, oh, here's the name of the person. Oh, okay. I'm just going to save $500 and put that towards something on our, like we can actually use on our trip, like support a local vendor who's doing a tour or something like that. So
well, and I think that there's a lot of the more people learn as a consumer to buy direct, you're helping the industry as a whole. You're helping locals. You're helping that dollar stay local. When you're booking through Airbnb and you're booking through Vrbo or Expedia or Booking.com, a big chunk of that money is not going local. It's going multinational.
Yeah.
And it's going into the hands of huge. I'm sorry if anybody's invested in those, but I'm just telling you now, I'd rather see the money spent local, stays local, supports local, than supports somebody operating an offshore bank account in a multinational jurisdiction. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And I think as people are becoming wiser with their dollars, that's just going to continue to expand. And I think that, the internet, as long as we're smart with the internet and we make sure legislators don't provide, crony capital protections for, these huge big tech companies and keep it free and open, that's going to be important. That's so that you as a consumer have the right to connect with anybody and use that internet as a free marketplace, not just of ideas, but a place to trade. With whomever you wish. And that's going to be important. That's much like how I see the vacation rental marketplace, is that you want to be able to communicate and contract with and pay for places that you want to stay at, especially in our field, directly with that provider. And it's that protection that you got someone local that will look after things for you, where, Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com, they can't provide that service.
No, they're not. They don't have, when they at that scale with so many locations. I mean, I could Google some place right now in the deep south of, nothing wrong with the deep south of the United States, but if you've ever been there before, there's some very, unpopulated areas, but they probably are running an ad for that area for an Airbnb. If I Google, that's like the level they're at with their advertising, but they don't have a true connection in certain areas or most areas, right? They don't have, most people feel like they've been burned, especially independent hosts. They if they're new to it, they're like, this is great. And then I think there's like probably 18 months, 36 months in, they're like, ooh, this kind of isn't great. And then they start talking to their friends or people who have done it longer, and they're like, yeah, see what we've been telling you, so.
Well, and I think you're also going to see a trend where hotel operators and vacation rental managers are coming into a convergence, right? We're on a similar track, especially when it comes to market dependence, and if we're dependent, they're all trying to get independent, like many of us are. There's things we'll be able to work together locally. We may not be on the currently, and there's a lot of STR battles, and we know the hotel associations behind it. But hey, Marriott Homes and Villas, they're now into vacation rentals. You've got Accor with One Fine Stay, they're now into vacation rental game. I just saw an announcement last week of a company called Graduate Hotels has now announced they're doing STRs. Choice Hotels advertises vacation rentals. I think Best Western. I mean, they're all getting into it, and they see the value to it on that side. But they all have one thing in common. They all want to. If you look at the hotels, they've been working hard to become OTA, reducing their OTA dependencies.
Yep. And especially like Marriott's a good example where they have the direct traffic.
Yep.
To be able to pull that off, and they all follow suit.
Right, their app, their Bonvoy rewards, they've got that side of it. Now the big part I think would be an exciting change for our industry as a whole is the vacation rental industry gets heavily deep into the rewards program so that travelers can cash in their rewards to stay with you, their air miles or whatever reward systems that are out there on your credit card. Somehow we need to find ways to get connected to that. That's a big market where, there's people out there in the world that have got tens of thousands, not millions of air miles stored up, especially people run their whole businesses on their credit cards and they have a lifetime of travel for free.
Yeah.
And if there's new ways that they can use them besides going to a hotel or a resort type experience or a flight or rent a car, but hey, you can rent a villa, a house, a condo, a vacation homes anywhere, that opens up a whole new world of where they can spend those points. And that's like another tier where we can work on that sort of book direct is maybe in some ways working with those rewards networks, which is
Cool.
would be a nice way to really change things up. And because the hotels are already doing it, the vacation rental managers, we need to get in there. But just to touch on that point about that experience, I mean, if you want to take a look at why an Airbnb can't be the manager, they never will be, is look how hard a company like Vacasa is going at it right now. They're really struggling. And, for their expected inventory growth with the rate of attrition, it just doesn't they're not going to make it, right?
The math does not math, as they say on that one.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to grow, 20% inventory in 1 year, but you're losing 20% in 1 year. So that means you got to grow 40%.
Yeah, and
20% numbers. So, but there's a case. There's this massive consolidating property management company that could be almost like an OTA, but they're now managing on the ground and having tens of thousands of units to manage it is a big struggle. You don't have any buy-in by anyone who's local. You might have a few great managers, but there's going to be a lot they don't. They don't own it. They don't have an ownership stake on what's going on locally. They're as an employee, not saying it's a bad thing about employees. You have employees that are great employees and love the corporate culture they're in. But they're more likely to be excited working with a local company where there's a local connection versus a large multinational, which is disconnected a lot on the management side. So again, another big benefit for independent managers right there is, we're able to pick up a lot of inventory of big companies like that lose.
Yeah, I think there's been obviously other companies that have done a similar model where you buy other companies out. But the nice thing is what they've done is keep their brands and kept that local company going.
Yeah.
So like Hawaii, especially in Kona on the Big Island, like vacation rentals aren't loved by locals, but when you have a local company, there's local people that work there. Not that they don't work at Vacasa, but it's just very different, and it's almost not competition because it's almost like Vacasa seems to get new owners, and then they get someone who just bought a vacation rental, and they're just, here's the numbers, right? Put your numbers in, this is what we're going to give you, and then after about a year or two, they end up going to a local company, and that's the attrition rate. That's 20%, right? It's almost,
you take that scale and put it across the world wherever they are. I mean, the sheer numbers of 20% is huge.
Yeah.
To have, 2 out of 10 properties disappear in 1 year.
Yeah, and it's normal to have attrition. People sell, people change their mind. Think, you're not going to keep everyone, but 20%. I mean, that's crazy. That's a 20% loss yearly, and then you're going to spend, like you said, you got to go spend 10 times that to go get property managers or get people to list with you. So,
yeah, I think somebody who I would call them a consolidator that's actually probably doing it right would be like V-Trips.
Yes,
they're not overwriting the brand and making it vanish and then putting their brand in place. They're maintaining those local long-term brands that have been there, keep the people local, keep that business seen as local, even though it's owned by V-Trips now. That way, the Vacasa model is, but I guess it's kind of a pun, but I think they're like the Borg from Star Trek, right? They just kind of suck it all in, and you lose all your identity and everything, and they don't care. You're now part of the whole collective of Vacasa, right? And but how does that affect a local market where that brand might have been there for 20 plus years, and people learn to love that brand and stay there, and then all of a sudden it all changed? They have no affinity for something new, right? And that's the difficulty in branding, of course, is you lose. If you try to start something new in an area, you're starting from scratch, and the locals have been there for a long time. People learn to love them, and that's a big part of being an independent operator. And especially all you vacation rental managers out there are purely on Airbnb and all your listings there. You don't have a brand. You don't.
Nope.
You need to build a brand. You better start doing it quickly, because as things change rapidly here, and you may even be too late, but get going out there, get a website, get a brand, get a PMS, managing your own units, and just start marketing and start getting book direct traffic and processing your own payments as much as you can.
Yeah, it's never too late to start. I think like you say, they're probably more vulnerable than anyone, and the sooner they can start and realize they don't need it yet, but when you're at the mercy of someone else like that, it's 15% the big change in income. So
well, especially when before you didn't have to worry about running analytics accounts and SEO marketing and spending Google AdWord campaigns and now newsletter services and all the things you got to do, and outreach to all your prior guests. I mean, that's just time, labor, and a lot of stuff, but it is labor intensive, to manage these companies. You got to have the right people, which is good. I mean, I think the beauty, as I mentioned earlier in our conversation, how the industry's changed a lot. We have a lot of great vendors that are out there in the industry that can support that now. You don't have to do it all yourself. You can hire pros that will work on contract to manage your newsletter campaigns, look after your SEO and websites and Google Analytics and AdWord campaigns and things like that. So you can. So you haven't built your company yet on a front end approach like that. It's critical you do, but don't think you're alone out there. And that's what I would tell every new op. And I do it locally. I run into, there's more Airbnb host type management companies than there is independent companies that are book direct like we are in our marketplace. I said most of them have risen through Airbnb and maintain that. And I keep saying the same thing: get your own website up, get it going. You got to protect your inventory, and if Airbnb goes into a downturn, how do you compensate for that? Right? It's you don't. Right? You're going to be scrambling behind the 8 ball, and you got owners going, "Hey, how come there's no more revenue coming in? Things have slowed right down. Nothing's coming in through Airbnb," and you're like,
"Well, a crazy." I'm on all these Facebook groups. Those Facebook groups are great. If you guys are listening to join them, and they have tons of them. I mean, I'm probably part of 100 just because I like to read them and see what people are talking about. So it's, but one of them is this classic post was, and I've seen it several times, is, "Hey, I can't find my listing on Airbnb." So what they do is they have an algorithm. They optimize it for nightly rate, because they want to get as much gross income as they can for their booking fee. So there's people that are like, "I've gone to almost 0 bookings and I should be getting bookings," and they're like, "I can't find it on Airbnb." And I even did a test. I hired someone. I picked one area in Hawaii, and so it said 300 plus on the bottom search bar of Airbnb. So I had them go through every single page and make an Excel list. And I know for a fact there's over 2,000 in this area, and only 355 or something came up. Yeah, and that was no dates, and that was just in one area. So
it's funny you say that, because I've been watching on our local Airbnb host clubs on Facebook, the chatter. I can't find my listing. Anybody know what's going on? And we're on Airbnb as well. And as I said, we're not dependent off them, but we do use them. And I'll get owners that'll reach out to me and say, "Hey, the listing's not showing up. Anyone know what's going on?" I say, "That's Airbnb's algorithm." They'll move you in when they feel they need to make money off you. But part of the problem Airbnb does is, their marketing is based on where the markets are hot. So they're going to move that marketing dollars to where they're getting the biggest bang for their dollars. So if you're in a market that currently slow, they're not going to upspend to drive traffic there, and they'll probably reduce that inventory show just to try and get bookings on what they would deem as, they're more worthy hosts. And you'll notice it's the ones that are, they're top tier super host status. I don't know what they call it. It's not super host because anybody can just be a super host now.
Premier host or something.
Yeah, it's something like that. They basically list and where they're exclusive. They don't list on any other platforms, and so they're putting a lot of attention on that. And if anybody saw any takeaways from Airbnb's third quarter results discussion, or sorry, I guess it was second quarter. No, it was third quarter results ended in September. Some of the discussion that Airbnb's been talking about is creating a paid search result within their own network, and it's not something they've ruled out. So that could be another thing. You're not only paying 15%, but if you want to be seen better, well, one, you better be exclusive, and two, you might have to spend a few extra dollars with them to move your rankings within Airbnb itself. So, so is Airbnb a transactional booking engine, or is it becoming a transactional booking search engine? And maybe that's the direction they might be thinking they're going. I was reading it. I was quite fascinated going, okay, well, that's going to chase away a lot of people. Yeah. But as an independent, like an individual host who's doing it themselves, they're probably going to panic, right?
Yes. What do you do, right? Yeah.
I've been so full with Airbnb for 4 years. What's happened, right? Well, they changed their algorithm. They're going to give money. They're going to drive money into the ones that are most loyal. And if their market share and their marketing is just not driving the same numbers of people anymore, well, they're only going to expose what they know books.
Yeah, they're not going to, they only have they have, especially with paid ads, right? Our attention spans, they're looking through these pages. They're going to put what they think will be the most converting a match for that person to try to get someone to book versus just showing them, everything. So
especially you got hosts that aren't full time, right? Like they go away for a couple months out of the year and they open up 2 months in their property, and so a lot of Airbnb's inventory is short periods available, and that's it. It's not year-round vacation rentals, and it's little bits here and there. Hey, I go to Mexico for 2 months out of every year, so I'm going to open up my home vacation rentals, or out on my boat or whatever for the summer, and I'll open up a bit of time in there. They're not going to value you anymore. No. They want the workhorses that are always around. So that's going to really change their inventory numbers as well. So I think that's going to be a big thing, is the ones that don't produce, they might have to take a second look at those and start reducing what's not paying, right? And especially right now, they're just not at the same level. Sure, we all went through the pandemic. When things opened up, it created that huge pent-up demand, and everybody was making high rates. Well, that's changed. We're now going the other direction. Things are slowing down. We're more going maybe into traditional seasonal averages, and maybe we're sorry, I've got a call coming in. I'll just end that on there. It could mean that that inventory level is going to decline because there's just not that level of demand anymore. And now you have, as you said, the extra layer of potential major housing crisis, in the sense that we're going to have a crash in housing prices, and people are defaulting on mortgages, much like the subprime crash of 2008. You're going to have a lot of inventory that's going to go, okay, I got to pivot. I got to do something here. Okay, I'll put it on Airbnb, and all of a sudden there's a whole bunch more inventory. What does that do? Rates
price.
With less people traveling because they're all being laid off.
Yes.
2019. We're not going back to 2019 for some time. I think everyone's just gonna have to recognize that. So
sweet. Awesome, man. Well, thank you for taking the time, and super cool insights. I think will be interesting for independent hosts as well, to because I think we all can work together in some fashion. And I think like you said, the OTAs are not evil, to go on record. We did say that, but there is definitely a lot of vulnerability with not having your own brand and not working on your own business, and picking that line between, okay, I'm working on my listing on Airbnb. Is that really working on my business, or is it working on theirs? Right.
Yeah.
So,
And that's exactly it. The future is to, you need to, create your own future and reduce your dependencies, build your brand up, build those relationships up with your guests. But again, yeah, the OTAs aren't evil. They're just a necessary scenario for a lot of people to fill in gaps they can't do. And some of you, if you're completely dependent, just start working on it. Start using those guests you've had. Once they're in your place, they're now yours to communicate with.
yes. Don't give them the link to book on Airbnb again. Got to figure out how to get them to book direct with you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's much easier now to go get your own website too. If you're an individual host, you can there's companies out there who build a single website in which can connect you to Stripe payment systems and things like that. Like I think a Lodgify, and there's others like that out there that provide that kind of service. So
yeah, cool.
But for the future, I think there's lots of positive stuff coming up here soon.